Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to God.
Sometimes when we have a Sunday where we read two Gospels, I mean, there's always a reason why there are two Gospels read. Sometimes it's the lectionary, and then there's also the feast, or the after feast. We've just experienced the feast of the elevation of the Holy Cross of Christ. And so we're in the after feast period. So that's why we read the Gospel from Mark, the second Gospel today. And the first one was the lectionary, the one that falls on its given day, which was from Matthew. Sometimes they dovetail together so perfectly and so serendipitously, because it doesn't always mean that the after feast of the cross is going to fall on that same gospel day every single time, on that same Sunday. And sometimes the after feast will be whenever, September 14th happens or whatever. So that's going to change as the calendar changes. And so they don't always come together at the same time, these two gospel readings. But it happens quite often when that does happen, that they really speak to one another very well. Not always. Once in a while I'll get two gospels that I can't seem to reconcile together, at least to put the same homily together. But I was struck this week by each of these gospels being precisely the same gospel. Not the words, not the scenario. Of course, in Matthew's gospel, he's talking about taking up your cross and coming after me, and etc., etc. And in Matthew, he's talking about the parable, in Mark, he's talking about the parable of the wedding feast and the servant who was found without his wedding garment. Well, Father Adam, those are not clearly the same thing. They're not talking about the same thing, and it's two different gospel writers. What are you talking about? Well, I'll tell you. What does it mean, do you suppose, to take up your cross? It's good language. It's an image. It's a picture. We sort of get what he means when he says, take up your cross and come after me. Or we can extrapolate what he might mean. We can ponder it, and it can mean many things throughout our lives. What does it mean to take up our cross and follow Christ? What does Christ mean when he says that? I don't believe that Christ envisioned every single baptized person being laid upon a wooden device of political torture and being made to die a physical death. If you look across your life at the people you know who have died, I would posit that few of them have actually been crucified in the flesh. And if that's wrong, tell me about that, because I'd love to hear that story. That would be a rather unusual experience for us these days. So what does he mean by taking up the cross? And how does that have anything to do with the parable in Mark of the wedding feast? They're both cautionary tales. One is a tale. One is a parable. And one was a conversation. And if Christ is talking about the cross in Matthew, he hasn't been crucified yet. Well, not on our timeline anyway. The cross is the beginning of all things. So, of course, Christ understands. He's using a metaphor. He's using an image that hasn't even yet begun to have a shape in a Christian context. He's talking about stuff that is yet to happen. If you want to come after me, my people, those of you who are listening to me, those of you who will hear my words and who will bind their lives to the gospel, both then and now, if you wish to come after me, you must take up your cross. He's talking to them that the key to the kingdom of heaven, the way into heaven, the key is the cross. Now, Again, he doesn't necessarily mean being crucified, but he does mean having our will crucified and our pride crucified. He does mean that the way to heaven, the way to salvation, is through love. Another word for which is humility. Another word for which is sacrifice. Another word for which is selflessness. You see, all of these are the cross. The cross is the symbol of all of those things. And if we do not imitate Christ, if we do not take this image of the cross upon ourselves and make it our own, make this our identity, what is Christ's identity, if anything but the cross? Because this has become a symbol of love, true love. Perfect love, humility, sacrifice, self-emptying. This is love. And if we emulate this, if we take this to ourselves, if this becomes who we are, then this is our way to the kingdom of heaven. This is our salvation. This is our invitation to the wedding feast. He tells us a story of the wedding feast. Few would come. So he said, go get anybody you can find. Get them all. Everybody's invited. Every last one of them. And they come, and somebody still, he's there, but he's not ready. He's not prepared. He hasn't accepted the invitation. He's there for the free food, I guess. And he wasn't prepared. To show up at a wedding feast unprepared, especially in that cultural context, was an offense to God. It was an offense to the host. If you didn't have what it took to show up to a feast to which you were invited, it was provided for you, so that you could be accounted and invited to the table. And by not putting on your wedding garment, you say no thank you. And of course, in the image of that parable, the person who showed up, the guest, was bound hand and foot and thrown into the outer darkness where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's a great image, weeping and gnashing of teeth. Hopelessness, despair, emptiness, solitude, singularity, disunity, unconnectedness, and no relationship. No love. These are the same story. If you want to come after me, take up your cross and follow me. If you want to come as a guest to the wedding feast, be prepared. How are we prepared? By accepting that invitation. Showing up. It's very simple. Both of these are very simple. He wants us to be saved. He wants us to accept that which He provides. He wants us to identify this not with torture, but with love. And He wants to see this example. He wants us to understand that true love is through relationship, and how we interact with one another, and how we sacrifice for one another, how we make ourselves less so He can be more. Taking up our cross and coming after Christ, what that may mean to you and I throughout our lives might change a little bit depending on our circumstances and the state of our heart and our mind. It might change. But it's always the same thing at the end of the day. Laying aside our earthly cares, conquering pride by submitting to our will to the will of God, denying ourselves. If you want to come after me, deny yourselves. Take up your cross. That's how you come after me. That's how you live a life that reflects the life I live. Is by taking up your cross. Sometimes for us it means shutting our mouth. Sometimes the most charitable thing and loving thing we can do for someone is not speaking. Sometimes it is literal charity. Sometimes it is actually speaking to somebody that we wouldn't normally speak to. Sometimes it is bringing ourselves to the foot of the cross in confession, so that the Lord may put us back in order. We seek this relationship, this connectedness, so that we can pick up our cross and follow in his footsteps. We want to be present at the wedding feast. You see, again, these are both cautionary tales. What to do, what not to do. It's the same gospel when you really look at it, when you really examine it. Deny yourself. Do different than you're inclined to do. Pride is the root of all sin, and pride is the enemy of the cross. To take up your cross is to embrace the image of Christ. And that image is sacrifice. The wedding feast is served in heaven. We're not meant to not enjoy, by the way, our time here. It's not meant to be a dismal commentary on the gospel. We're supposed to live miserable lives, etc. That's not what it means. The Lord has given us this earth and everything in it, and it is beautiful and good, he says. Or it's made to be made beautiful and good. I'm not saying that we should go about our existence and feel guilty for being happy, or feel guilty for enjoying something beautiful. That's not it at all. It's quite the opposite. But we must understand that salvation means constant sacrifice, constant humility. We must seek that as the greatest good, because to seek humility is to seek Christ. To seek humility is to seek true love. And to seek true love is to take up your cross and identify with that very image that Christ gives us. Do it daily. This isn't quite a large cross. It would be probably a better image if I would have taken the one behind Gunnar and tried to preach with that in my hand. I think that would have been a little bit unwieldy. But it would have left you with a good image. Take up your cross. The way to heaven is through love. And love is humility. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.